Hi everyone, welcome to the next session of SAP BW online training tutorials. In this session, I'm going to explain you about one of the info provider which is available in BW. It's nothing but SPO, semantically partitioned object. So in earlier sessions, I've explained about multi-provider and I've also explained about info set. So when it comes to multi-provider, one of the uses or one of the scenario where we might need multi-provider in BW is when we have a huge volume of data which is related to one specific application, say like sales, where definitely we are going to have millions of records. So in such cases, instead of storing the entire data in one info cube, we can create smaller info cubes and we can divide the data based on individual characteristics, say like sales organization. So we can divide the data based on sales organization, or we can divide the data based on calendar year. So if we have around 10 years of data in BW which is related to sales, instead of storing 10 years of data in one info cube, we can create 10 info cubes with same structure. Then we can load each year data in one info cube so that the size of each info cube will become smaller and it is easy to maintain such smaller info cubes in BW system. So when customer need reports or analysis on entire data set, we can create one multi-provider which is going to be a logical structure of the source info cubes that we are going to use, and we can build reports on multi-provider. So here what are going to be the challenges or concerns? So if we look at the structure, see, obviously we are talking about info cube. So we are going to have info cube. So info cube, it can be info cube with big data like entire data set, or info cube with smaller data sets. So in any case, we have to load the data. So when we are talking about loading data, obviously data has to come from source. So in our case, we are going to, or most of the times, we'll be loading data from DSO, data store object, to info cube. So underlying source is going to be our DSO. Okay. So here we are going to have DSO. So now what happens? How can we load data from DSO to cube? Definitely we need a data loading object which is going to be DTP, data transfer process, and we need to have a structure which can connect source and target, right? So the structure is going to be transformation here. So here we'll have transformation in between these two. Transformation, and using DTP we'll load the data. So now we'll join this. So the data loading object here is going to be data transfer process. So now we are talking about loading data from DSO to info cube. So to load data from DSO to info cube, we need one transformation and one DTP. See now, as we are going to have a huge volume of data, let's say we are going to split the info cube. In such cases, we have to create identical info cubes before we load data. So we are going to have info cubes like this. To load each data set. Okay, so here the first challenge is, even though the cubes are going to be identical, we have to manually create each and every info cube. First one. Now, so we are talking about loading data to different cubes. Definitely we need one data transfer process and one transformation for each info cube. So how many info cubes we are going to create in BW? We need to create those many DTPs and transformations to load data from DSO to smaller info cubes or different info cubes. So obviously developing work or developer work is going to be more, and once the development is done, administrative work also going to be a little bit more, because once we have DTPs and transformations, every day or on weekly basis we have to load the data. So there should be someone who is going to monitor these data loads, like whether it is going to complete or not. Earlier it was only one DTP and one DTP. Now because of small info cubes, we are going to have 5 DTPs. So instead of monitoring one DTP, same person has to monitor 5 DTPs. Even though we are going to have advantage for the end user, at developer level or monitoring level, we need to put a little more effort to achieve this. So now, is there any alternative? So from 7.3 onwards, from BW 7.3 onwards, SAP has introduced a new object using which we can overcome this, which is nothing but semantically partition object. So we can achieve a same functionality using semantical partition object, but the advantage with that is we no need to create all the partitions. We are going to give just one object as a reference and we'll put how many partitions we want. Then system will automatically create. In the same way, for each and every partition system is going to generate, it will also generate DTPs and it will also generate transformation. So we are not going to create anything manually. At any point of time, we'll create only one object manually and other objects are going to be generated by system. Now let's see, we'll talk about the requirement or scenario for which we'll create SPO. So now let's go into the data we have. If we look at the data we have, let's open our transaction data, and we'll see like based on which characteristic we can divide the data so that we can load different data sets into each info cube. So now majorly people will go for the characteristics which are going to have very less unique values. So in these cases it might be year, or it might be your sales organization, or it might be your company code, or it might be your region. So based on the kind of requirement. So now let's say in our scenario we have sales organization which has 3000, sales organization 3000, and we also have sales organization 2000 and then 1000. So we have 3 values. So what we'll do now is we'll create a SPO, semantically partition object, to load data to 3 different cubes based on sales organization characteristic as a filter. So at the end of the day, what we'll do, we'll load data which is having sales organization 1000 into one info cube, and 2000 into one another info cube, and 3000 to third info cube. So SPOs can be created for info cubes, or SPOs can be created for DSOs. So we can also load the data for DSOs based on individual characteristic filter. I mean, dividing DSOs will be useful when you are going to have reports on DSOs as well. So now we'll see what are the, so this is the explanation that I've explained till now. So you can go through that, and some of the advantages of SPOs. The first one is always going to be better performance with mass data. Like when we have huge data volume, we are going to have very good performance improvements. Then close data connection. See, now what we are doing, we are loading a data sets based on sales organization into different cubes. Now let's say if a data load fails, let's say the data load failed, which was loading to info cube 1. So when we say info cube 1, it is always a data set with sales organization 1000, but we had only failure for 1000. Still we have end users will have access to 2000 sales organization as well as 3000 sales organization. Earlier, when we are loading entire data set to one info cube, if data load fails, then end users will not have, are not going to have access to any data set, because we are loading entire data to one info cube. So because of using SPOs, we are also going to have flexibility, or like a closed data connection. Even though one request fails, the other request will get successful, and users will have at least some data for analysis. And when when your company is working on different time zones, then you can load the data based on time zones as well. Like I told, instead of calendar year, we can also load data based on time zones, so that whenever people comes in certain time zone, they will have data available for analysis. Now, so once we define semantic partition objects, then we can build multi-provider on top of semantic partition objects, and we can build reports. So now we'll see how to create semantic partition objects in BW system. So we'll log into BW now. Okay, so I've already logged out, so I'll just log off and log in again. So to log on to any SAP system, we have to come to SAP logon, where we have to add all our system details. So once we add the system details, to log in, we have to double click on that. Then we'll get SAP logon screen. So here we have to give our username and password. Along with, we have to provide client as well as logon language, wherein logon language is going to be optional. So I've given username, password, then enter, which gives us initial screen of any SAP application. So from here on, based on our requirement, we have to enter the relevant transaction code. So in this case, we need RSA1, where we are going to do modeling activities. So we'll get modeling screen. So under modeling, click on info provider. Then we'll get our info area in which or under which we are going to create SPO. So right click on info area, then select where is that, nothing but like to create info semantic partition objects. It's always the first thing is going to be whether you are going to create semantic partition objects for cube or semantic partition objects for DSO. So if you are going to create for DSO, then here you have to select create data store object. If you are going to create for info cube, then you have to select create info cube. So here we have info cube. Now we are going to split that info cube into 3 partitions so that we can load the data based on sales organization. So for this requirement, we'll right click on create info cube. Then here we'll give info cube SP. We'll put info cube SPO. Now we'll put like this ZBW C for cube, but it's an SPO object. So SPO for sales orders info cube. So here the change that we have to do is the additional setting. Here we have, so we have to select this semantically partitioned object. Then only we can create partitions based on the info cube. So now we have already base info cube, right? The existing info cube we have already created. So we are going to use that info cube, which is nothing but ZBW C01. Okay, so it should be 3 to 6 characters SPO name. So what we'll do is we'll remove this. Now also it's, so I'll put like this ZBW SPO. Then we'll click on continue. Somewhere we are not. Okay, now we can click on create or F5 we can press. Now this will take us to SPO edit screen where we'll have 6 major steps. Okay, so now we'll make use of full screen. So we'll hide navigator so it will get this. So now this is SPO edit screen. So here we have on our left side the main steps that we need to perform to complete SPO creation. So the first one is maintain object, then maintain partitions, then start activation, then create transformation, create data transfer process, and create process change. So these are the 6 major steps that we have to perform to complete the SPO creation process. Right now we are in maintain object. So this is the template or the cube that we are going to use as a reference to create our SPO. Now we'll move to maintain partitions. So this is where we are going to define how many partitions we need and what is the condition for each partition. So once we move here, we'll get all the list of characteristics that has been used in this design process. So we can select on which characteristics, or based on which characteristics we want to have partitions. So in this case we need partitions based on sales organization. So sales organization is here. Select that and move it to right side. In the same way, we can create based on whichever characteristic we need. We can either create based on division, or we can either create based on region, or we can create based on combination of fields. Let's say sales organization and plant, or sales organization and year. If you feel even for each sales organization also, if you are going to have millions of records, then you can further split down based on year. So it's going, then the partitioning is going to be based on both sales organization and calendar year. But for us, we need only partitioning based on sales organization. Then click on continue. So now you can see, right, this has come to green. So here by default system has given one partition. Okay, so we can change the partition name also here. Change description. So what we'll put, so first one is going to be based on sales organization 1000 value, sales organization value 1000. So for that we'll change this and we'll put SO 1000. Then we have to put filter here. So it's based on sales organization, and if you're going to give single value, we have to check this and give the value here. Okay, so here we can enter. Now in the same way, so this is the first partition, but for our scenario we need another two partitions, right? So to add another partition, we have to click on add partition. Okay, now we can change the description and we'll put SO 2000. So once we give that value, then we have to put the same filter. Okay, so now here we have to give 2000 as value. So here we can enter. Now we need one more partition. So to add, we'll click on add partition. Then we can change the description here. We'll put SO 3000 and filter. So if it is sales organization 3000 or other than 3000, anything, it has to store in the same partition. So to give more than one filter value or more than one value, we have to uncheck this, and then we can once we uncheck, then we can give from and to. Now 2 has been enabled, right? For all this, 2 field is grayed out. So here what we'll do, we'll put 3000 to some 9999 default value, so that whatever the partition except 1000 and 2000, it is going to store in third partition. So now here we also have some additional options, like if you want to add multiple partitions at a time, we can add, or if you want to delete any partition, we can delete using this option. Or if you want, for the same partition, if you want to put additional selection, we can add one more selection. And if you want to delete selection, we can delete the selection. So once we give the partitions or we define the partitions, then we can start the activation. So to start activation, we have to click on this. So now system starts activating the SPO. So what will happen is, here, based on the number of partitions we have given here, system will create those many identical objects. So if it is info cubes, system will create those many info cubes. If it is DSO, then system will create those many DSOs. So now we can see that based on this status bar, we can identify the activation process going on. So now we can see activation has done successfully. So we don't have any errors or warnings. That means activation is successful. So from here on, we have done only 3 steps. You see here we have done only 3 steps. The we are pending with next 3. So to proceed to the next step, we have to click on continue, which takes us to create transformation. Okay. So now to create transformations, we have to click here. Okay, to click on create transformation. So here by default system will populate the target. So we have to select what is the source. So here source is going to be our DSO, data store object. So what is our data store object? We have ZBW SD01. We'll click on continue or enter. So now system has created, right? So system has created the transformation. So this is called transformation, which I'll explain clearly in the next chapter. So now if we see here, we have some unmapped fields, okay, which can be mapped based on, like here we have billing date. Okay, so we can map that billing date to all the date related objects. So we'll take these two and we'll add it to calendar month as well as calendar quarter and calendar year. Okay, in the same way, BW price also has not mapped. So whatever the fields that are not mapped will get cross mark, into mark. So here price is going to be our quantity, okay, as well as the one with quantity as well as it's going to be cost. Okay, so to have that, we have to add, or we have to map quantity and then cost. So here we can also manage the mapping. Which has to be formula. Sorry, yeah. Here it should be quantity multiplied by cost, so that we'll get what is the price. Now we can check this. So formula syntax is correct. Then now we can continue with our once we have checked, we can go back. So it's formula now. Then we can check and transfer values. So once this is done, we can go ahead and check the transformation. Then we don't have any errors, then we can activate this. So now transformation is activated. So even though we have created only one transformation, system will create transformation for all the objects. So now transformations are done. Then as I explained here, so now we are done with transformation. Now we have to create DTPs. So to create DTPs, we have to click here, create data transfer process. This I'll explain in detail in the next chapter when we're actually loading data, actual or master data as well as transaction data into BW system from flat files. So now to create transformation, to create data transfer process, we have to select like to which and all we have to create data transfer process. So here to create data transfer process, we have template available here. So we have standard DTP template available. Then we are going to use copy from of the standard DTP to create our own DTP. So we'll select standard and then click on copy from. Here we can give our own name. Let's say DSO2 SPO info cube. Then click on continue. Now here we can change our settings. So by default here its source is data source, but in our case it's a DSO. So from DSO, right, we are loading it to info cube, which is semantically partitioned object. So here we are going to have a lot of options. The only thing we have to select is generate filters should be generated automatically. So when we select this option, filters will be assigned which we are selected when we are defining partitions. So based whatever the filters we have given for partitions, those will be assigned to DTP. So now we'll click on save. So now we have our own DTP. So this DTP has to be assigned to all these source objects. So to assign that, okay, we have to add, like once we create this, we have to select our DTP whatever we have created and the source objects. So we can use control and then select each object. So once we select the objects, we have to click on assign so that DTP will be assigned. So now if we see, even though DTP is assigned, it shows as not generated. So to generate the DTP, now we have to select the DTPs, use control, then click on generate. So this will activate the DTPs. System will activate DTP one by one. Now we can see, right, two are activated. Now it is activating the third one. So now we see all the 3 DTPs are active. Okay, now we are done with 5th step as well. Okay, the next step is adding all these objects, like, or adding these 3 DTPs to process chain. So process chains I'll explain I'll explain about process chains in administration chapter, but just to give you a brief about process chains. So process chains is used to automate the data loading process in BW. Say, like, whatever the data loading if you want to do, we have to either execute info package or data transfer process. See, if it is 1 or 2 objects, we can execute them manually. Think about 1000 info cubes or 2000 info cubes you have in the system. Definitely you are going to have 2000 or 3000 DTPs and another 2000 info packages. It's going to be nearly impossible to open each and every info package or data transfer process and execute that, then monitor that till it gets complete, then open one more DTP. So to automate this process, we have object called process chains, wherein we can add n number of objects into that, so that when you run that process chain, it will automatically triggers one by one, and once one object gets successful, then the trigger passes to other object. So that instead of monitoring n number of objects, if you can monitor one process chain, you can look at the data loading activities that are happening in your system. So it's the main objective is to automate the data loading process. Now we'll see how can we include all these DTPs into process chain. So now we'll click on create process chain. Okay, so here this is a process chain screen, because right now we don't have any process chain generated for this. To add these DTPs into process chain, we have to select the DTPs and then click on add. Okay, so all the DTPs are added. Now select all the DTPs and click on generate, which is going to generate process chain for us. So this is going to be the process chain starting condition. Like, what should be the starting condition? It should be either immediate, or if you want to start on specific date and time, we can start. Or if you want to start after particular job gets complete, then we can use after job. Or if you want to start after specific event, we can start. So there are a lot of starting conditions. So right now we'll use immediate start, and we can check and save this, then save here, then we'll come back. So now we can see, right? So this is the process chain name. So this particular process chain was saved and active. So now if you want to see that process chain, we can see it in RSPC. So to see that, we can go to /o RSPC. The name is, what is the name? It will be under unassigned nodes, or we can search for that. So the name is ZBWSPO load chain _1. So we can use this. So this is the name. Again, seems network issue. I'll just log in again. We'll go to RS7. Okay, then info provider. So these are SPO. So here we have all the semantic partitions. So for each object it will create that. I'll open this. So now, so here we have process chain overview. So from here we can go to process chain. So this is the process chain. If you want to look at it, I'll open same RSPC. So RSPC is the process chain overview. Okay. Or we can use this option to create new session. From here we can go to RSPC. Then so it's ZBW SPO load chain _1. So here we have our process chain. I want it in network mode. Now we can see, right? So all the 3 DTPs are added to this process chain. So instead of opening each and every DTP and executing it, if we execute this process chain, it is going to trigger all the 3 DTPs. So this is how we have to create, or we can create SPO, semantically partition object, in the SAP BW system. So even though it looks like we are just creating one object, okay, if we look at the RSA1 screen, under SPO we have 3 info cubes, so which are going to be similar objects. Okay, so in the same way you can create how many partitions you want, but everything looks like you are just creating one object, but the system will create same kind of objects for all the partitions. So in this way, like, you know, the burden for the developer also will get reduced, and we'll have the advantage of a faster performance and easy maintenance in the BW system. So this is about SPO, semantical partition objects. Now we can also create SPOs for the DSOs also in the same way. Say like if you go to create data store object, then we'll have semantically partition. So same process like how we have created for InfoCube, same way we'll create SPOs for DSOs. So we can only create SPO semantically partition objects either for InfoCube or for DSO. So the next info provider we have in BW is hybrid provider. So hybrid provider is again, it's not going to be a single object, or it's not going to be a logical structure which stores only or which is going to be a logical structure but doesn't store data. Hybrid providers are going to be combination of more than one object in BW system, and it stores data physically. So now I'll close this and I'll open hybrid providers. So hybrid provider. So hybrid provider is mainly used if customer wants to have both a real-time data as well as historical data analysis at the same time. See, using data warehousing, it is either possible to give analysis or to give reports on historical data, or we can give reports on real-time data. So if customer wants to have or take an advantage of having both historical as well as real-time, because when we are talking about historical, we'll store data in standard InfoCubes, or when we are talking about real time, we'll load data in real time InfoCube or direct update DSO. So combining them using multi-provider will lead to poor performances. So in such cases, if you want to have both, if customer wants to have both real time as well as historical data analysis with the same object, then we'll go for hybrid providers. Okay, so in hybrid providers, either we can combine a standard InfoCube which stores historical data with DSO, direct update DSO, which will have real-time data, or we can combine InfoCube, same standard InfoCube, which is going to have historical data, and we can use virtual InfoCube, which brings data from source itself. So we can have two scenarios using hybrid provider. So the first one is going to be we'll have InfoCube standard, and then we'll have direct update DSO. Okay, so these two gives us the hybrid provider. So wherein Standard info cube holds all the historical data, and direct update DSO will have real-time data. So here in this case what happens is, as we are going to have real-time data in DSO, we need to bring data from source to BW in real time. However, if we don't want to bring the data in real time to BW, still if customer want to have real time reporting, what we can do is we can make use of virtual info cube, which brings data directly from source, where we are not going to load data to BW itself. So in that case, what we can do is we'll have standard info cube, which stores all the historical data, and in the same way we'll have virtual info cube. So virtual info cube is going to be directly mapping to source objects. So virtual info cube. So combination of these two forms the hybrid info provider or hybrid provider. So hybrid provider is only available from BW 7.3. It's not available in BI 7. So there are two scenarios. Either we can use standard standard info cube as well as DSO, or we can use standard info cube for historical data and virtual info cube for real-time data access, which is going to come from source itself. So the advantage in this case is going to be we are not going to load any real-time data to BW system. So now we'll see how to create both hybrid provider in BW system. So we'll log into, so in info provider we'll right click on our info area, then select create hybrid provider. So in now we'll make use of info cube, standard info cube, as well as the DSO. Okay, so for we have right optimized DSO, sorry, direct update DSO here, which is ZBW SD04. So we'll use this. Now I'll give ZBW HP hybrid provider 1. So hybrid provider for sales data. Okay, so now, so here we also have hybrid provider type, like which type of hybrid provider. As I explained, we have two types of hybrid provider. One with so anyhow in two scenarios we are going to have standard info cube as common, but it will be either a direct update DSO or it's going to be virtual info provider. So in this case we'll use direct update DSO. So here we'll select with data store object and system will ask like whether you want to create new data store now or based on existing data store. So we have already data store object for this, which is ZBW SD04. Now we'll click on create. Oh, okay. In that case, what we'll do is we can make it as normal DSO. So to change it, we have to click on manage. Sorry, we can come back and open the object, edit. Now we'll go to settings, change. We'll make it as standard. So there are two ways, like either we can load a real-time data for direct update DSO, or we can load the data to standard DSO itself using Damien tools, which I'll explain later. Now we'll activate this. Now we'll go ahead and create hybrid provider. Okay, this is a simple warning which we can ignore. So now we have the objects. Okay, so now we can see, right, whatever the objects we have as part of DSO, we can see all the characteristics here. So if you want to see these, so now this as cube format, like how we have packages and dimensions, and in each dimension what are the fields. If you want to look these, or if you want to see this as a DSO structure, we can click here. Now which looks like a DSO. So however we want, we can look at the hybrid provider. Now we can go ahead and activate this. So to activate it is saved. So when we activate hybrid provider, BW itself creates all the DTPs and transformations required for hybrid provider. We no need to create transformations and DTPs separately. So now we can see it's active. So if we see here, we have hybrid provider. If we open this, we can see this is the cube and this is the DSO. So now to load data, to load all the historical data to cube, all the transformations and data transfer, the DTP has been created. So we don't need to create anything additionally. So this is how we can create hybrid providers in SAP BW system. So in this class, to give a summary of what I have explained about semantic partition objects, what is the advantage of using semantic partition objects, and how to create semantically partition objects. Then I have explained about hybrid providers, what are the different scenarios we have in hybrid providers, and how to create hybrid provider in BW system. So to have some additional theoretical knowledge about hybrid providers, you can go through the slides. So what kind of different types of hybrid providers, one with DSO and one with virtual info provider. So So this is about this session. In the next session, I'll explain about the another two pending info providers. One is composite provider and other one is transient provider. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.